Gators Breakdown, the Gators fan podcast, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast from Hoover, Alabama is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters, and you can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And as I mentioned, in Hoover, Alabama for SEC Media Days 2019, we get to hear from Dan Mullen, Feleipe Franks, Lamical Perine, and Jabari Zuniga. And to help me break SEC Media Days down is Will Sammon from The Athletic. He'll join me here on Gators Breakdown. We'll get his thoughts on a lot of the sayings from Mullen and the players and what they, some of the topics that were discussed at length. These players get asked the same questions a lot, so it's kind of funny. You go from one media room to the other and hear the same questions asked, and if you were in the previous room that these players have already answered it, but they got to answer it for somebody else as well. So it probably gets a little aggravating that they have to answer the same question over and over again. But that's part of what SEC Media Days is. And as I mentioned, Feleipe Franks, Lamical Perine, Jabari Zuniga, they've represented the University of Florida very well, and some really good choices there by Dan Mullen and the University of Florida in bringing those guys along. As I mentioned, Will Sammon from The Athletic will join me here to review it all. And I mean, a lot of Mullen talking about how much he enjoys being the head coach of the University of Florida, how important the bowl win was last year into for the heightened expectations for 2019. And I hear a lot about Feleipe Franks from Dan Mullen, about Franks taking that next step, and some pretty interesting quotes from Feleipe Franks in regards to what Dan Mullen has done for him. But before we get there, remember you can find Gators Breakdown on news4jax.com/Gators Breakdown. A lot more SEC Media Days coverage there as well at news4jax.com. And you can catch the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, YouTube, Spotify, all those services. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Gators Breakdown. Will Sammon from The Athletic join me right here on Gators Breakdown from SEC Media Days. How many times have you been to Hoover?
Well, do we count SEC baseball? Or just Media Days?
Just Media Days.
Just
there we
Media
go.
Days? 4?
4? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Were you in Atlanta last year?
I was.
How was it compare?
Atlanta, man, I could do without.
Okay.
It's pretty overwhelming, and for an event like this, I'm looking to kind of do my thing and not be overwhelmed more than I have to be. So Birmingham, Hoover works just fine for me, man.
Last year was my first one, and that was in Atlanta. But then, second one, I finally get to compare because I heard so many people comparing Alabama or comparing Birmingham and Atlanta, and I had no comparison. But I can see where this is a little more quaint. It's not as spread out, and I think people will enjoy that. But Greg Sankey today, back in Atlanta next year.
Yeah, I'm not excited about it. No, not excited about it, but it's fine. I mean, after that, I think the year after that, it's Nashville, right?
Yeah.
So that's cool.
That's the one I had heard rumored maybe for next year.
So did I, yeah. So did I. So I was a little bit surprised that we go back to Atlanta. But look, college football Hall of Fame is pretty cool.
That was the better part of that.
Yeah, so it's you got some different things. So I can see him switching up. I don't mind. I don't mind the switch up every year.
All right, Dan Mullen, Gators on day one. Your initial takeaway from Perine, Franks, Zuniga, and Mullen as they made their way into Hoover.
Well, I think first the summer and the attrition that occurred dominated the conversation at first for Dan Mullen especially, and that was to be expected because you did see a few transfers. You saw the signing class see 2 transfers plus 2 guys be academically really ineligible to even enroll, and you still have question marks remaining with 3 other guys. So those had to be addressed first, and it was interesting on a lot of levels because you could assess the signing class that way. You could assess how the team morale is and a lot of things. You go different directions. But not to put too fine a point on it from a team perspective, just because it's at the end of the day, this is still a pretty good team.
Yeah.
And maybe it affects depth. It certainly affects some depth down the road in a couple of years. But for right now, 2019, this is a pretty good football team. And so a lot of the talk went back and forth a little bit with Dan Mullen, whereas, okay, we need to get these questions about attrition and all the craziness that happened in the summer. But, oh, by the way, what do you think about Georgia and your chances of sort of competing at a high level with them? And so that was a good back and forth that kind of showed you all you need to know about where Florida is at right now. And I thought Feleipe Franks really won the day for Florida. I think that he was so much more comfortable with the media than I've ever seen him before. And granted, this is not after a game where they lost and against a rival where you're like a little bit combative to begin with because you're not in the greatest of moods. I get all that, but at the same time, he looked like he came into this eager to kind of talk and kind of share more about his personality. And I think as media, we're eager to share that for fans who enjoy that. They enjoy knowing who they're rooting for and why.
After the shushing of the crowd last year, that was the big topic for Feleipe Franks, and then goes on to tear to end the season. And I do think fans want to see, not the shushing side of Feleipe Franks, but the side that we got today. And you think, I do think it was. I saw you tweet about it. I've thought about it as well. It's been since Jeff Driscoll, since Florida's brought a quarterback to SEC Media Days. Was there some kind of message or sign sent from Dan Mullen in sending Feleipe Franks? Because it didn't really do it a lot at Mississippi State, and the quarterbacks, or maybe even felt like he had to at one point. But this kind of seemed like hey, this guy's turned the corner. He's the leader of our team. Let's take him and let him represent the University of Florida.
It could be interpreted that way, I think, because if you remind yourself of the history, 2014, he brings Dak Prescott. The guy was a junior, wasn't a senior, so he didn't really, quote, have to bring him, unquote. But then 2015 rolls around, and he still didn't want to bring him. He ends up bringing him, but he didn't really want to.
But he said,
but he said, look, the SEC office called me. They told me, hey, you kind of have to bring him because he's probably the best player of all time in Mississippi State history. So, hey,
and they were coming
bring
off
that guy.
They're coming off a great 2014.
Seriously, yeah. I mean, but that's just the point of, like, he's not somebody who sort of gloats about his QBs all the time. Not his current ones. His past ones, yes, but not the guys who are currently throwing the ball for him. And then even if you compare it to Nick Fitzgerald, so Nick Fitzgerald was the quarterback in 2016 and had a great year, especially in the sort of the shadow of Dak Prescott. 2017 comes around, he's not going to media days. He was the known starter, same situation as Feleipe Franks, heading into his second year as a starter, didn't go to media days. They went with 3 seniors. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to put too fine of a point on it, but there's something to be said that I think Dan Mullen's really proud of what Feleipe Franks was able to accomplish. He's really proud of himself for his coaching ability probably too. But he also is pretty proud about Feleipe Franks, and I think you could go in a couple of different ways with how you interpret it. But he feels probably a lot better than he did last year, let's put it that way, going into the season. And he's comfortable with what he has and who he has.
Before we get into the sound bites that we have from the players and Mullen here, you mentioned the attrition and how we tried to beat and kind of poke at Mullen, and I was around Franks when he was asked about it, and he kind of just shoved it off and shrugged it off his shoulder, and I think he's honest. I really don't think he cares. I think he's more worried about the roster that they're going into the season with, and fall camp starting soon. And hey, it's not about the guys who aren't here. It's about the guys who are here.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to make light of it or anything like that, but we're talking about, as far as recently, okay, Brian Edwards was your third, fourth string cornerback. And if he's playing, no offense to him, but that's not your first option. And you wanted Kyrie Elam to sort of surpass him on the depth chart anyway. So, I mean, that's the position that he's in, and he was getting surpassed by Chris Steele as well, for that matter. And you can go down the list. I mean, Johnson, the linebacker, or Jackson, the linebacker as well. Both of those guys were getting buried on the depth chart. Ventrell Miller and James Houston were the main backups, not them two. And you could just go back and forth all the way to McCoy, the center. He was not somebody in the mix for the job. So, like, if I'm Feleipe Franks, I kind of have the same thing where it's like, all right, well, it's not as if my 2 wide receivers have left me, or, I mean, you look around, Lamical Perine's still here. I would be more concerned about what the offensive line has been doing this summer, more than
jumping in swimming pools.
Yeah, exactly. Taking backflips over John Hevesey's porch or something. That would raise my eyebrows, and yeah, I would be a lot more concerned about that. and how their development is going. But like I said before, I mean, like it's one of those things where it's not going to be the difference between Florida getting to 9 wins or surpassing it or falling short of it. Their attrition for this year, 2019, will have zero to minimal impact whatsoever on their outcome this year.
Yeah, and especially for this year, of course, you're mentioning it probably will hurt for 2020 and 2021. Feleipe Franks may not even be here.
Yeah, and you also got time, though. You also have time to...
And different ways to make it up.
Yeah.
There we go. All right, so looking into a little bit of sound bites here, and one from Dan Mullen talking of the way he enjoys being the Florida Gator head coach.
I love being the head coach of the University of Florida. The Gator Nation, I mean, the passionate fan base, the excitement, that they have. I love, you saw at times last year, with the stadium packing up and the energy and creating that unbelievable home field advantage that you have in the swamp. I think that's all so important and so critical. And, fortunately, I understand. I've been there before. I've seen it at the highs, and then we weren't all highs in my time there before, and understanding how to get through it. But I think it's a really exciting time. I think our fans are hungry to get back to go compete for championships, and they're a passionate fan base. They love winning, and but I am too. I'm very passionate. I love to win. I love to compete, and so I love being the head coach of the Gators.
Will, so you listen to that, and I think it's pretty clear. We go back to the LSU game last year, and Mullen's jumping around like a crazy man on the sideline and knocking his own headset off and spinning around, trying to get the crowd hyped up. And look, he did it last year at Media Days. He did it this year at Media Days. The custom Jordans that get glances, and ESPN showing them off, or we're all taking pictures of them and posting them on social media. The players talked about Mullen's swag and how they were discussing his shoes on the flight from Gainesville to Birmingham. You've been around Dan Mullen for years now. Can you tell he really enjoys being the head coach at the University of Florida?
Definitely. I think that's probably the question I get asked the most is, what's the difference and what's the level of how much he has changed, what his sort of personality, how much of it has carried over, this or that. And I always go to the fact that he's a lot happier here in Gainesville and being the coach of Florida. And it makes sense. Not to say that he was super unhappy at Mississippi State, but look, this was a guy who was born and raised in the Northeast. I mean, he's a Northeast guy, and speaking from experience here, you watched Florida. When you're in the Northeast, when you're in New York, New Hampshire, Connecticut, you're watching Florida. That's the team or you're watching Notre Dame. Maybe you're watching a little bit of Ohio State, Michigan, that sort of thing. But Florida is really the main team that you watch because you probably have grandparents who go to Florida and live there. But no, that's one of the teams, especially for a guy like Dan Mullen. So
he's an offensive guy, and there's no way he'd not notice what Steve Spurrier was doing in the 90s.
Oh, I mean, the whole thing. I mean, the visor that he wears, the whole thing is sort of like an ode to Spurrier in a lot of ways. So that's interesting. And, yeah, I mean, he's just a lot happier. And I think that sometimes you say to yourself, what's he doing wrong, or how could it be different, or things that he has to learn. I think for the most part he's doing that, and it will be interesting to see how much he pulls away from what worked at Mississippi State and learning, okay, maybe this won't necessarily work for Florida, even though it worked for me in the past. That's what I'm most interested in kind of learning about as we head into his second season.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first topic that kind of goes along that line would be recruiting. Hey,
right.
We know how much you can win with 3 stars and in a littering of 4 stars and 5 stars, but with the type of talent we know you can get at Florida, we want to see how you react to getting the 5 stars and the 4 stars and going head-to-head with Saban and Kirby, because I think there's no question he's a great coach. You pair that with elite talent, and I think that's why I think fans kind of get frustrated with recruiting, because they know if he does get them, it's probably a for sure thing. Right now, it's still, all right, let's develop and let's see where the cards fall or how they may lay. But we know, and a lot of fans know, if you pair him with elite talent, the results are probably going to be pretty amazing.
And you have to remember that development takes time.
Yeah.
And so if you keep recruiting guys who need to be further developed than, say, other guys, that's going to take time. And so that's why fans, understandably so, get a little bit impatient with it, because they don't want to have to wait for their wide receiver to be, 3 years ready, and finally he's able to do something. And it's like, well,
how many times did we get last year? Where's Jacob Copeland?
Copeland, yeah, man. I mean, and like that's probably a bad example just because of the depth chart of the wide receiver.
Exactly,
But like we could even use the offensive linemen though as examples. And I know that offensive line, I've written about it a ton. It's hard to recruit and evaluate and pick those type of guys, and even the 5-stars take time there. But that's really the point that I'm trying to make, is that development takes time. And so when you are already in catch-up mode with trying to get to the measuring stick that unfortunately for Florida is Georgia right now, not to say that there are shortcuts, there really aren't, but you really got to start recruiting that high level of talent that will help close that gap a little bit.
All right, Mullen he was asked about the bowl win and how important that was, the big bowl win, Peach Bowl win versus Michigan last year. And it kind of translated into, of course, the expectations for this year, how they're heightened because, look, they were happy with being a top 10 win team, a top 10 team last year in the final polls and beating Michigan, but there's still so much more.
I think obviously winning the bowl game always helps in the offseason. I think it leaves a bit of excitement, leaves a bit of unfinished business of what maybe could have even been better during the course of last season and that you want to build on. Obviously, I've been a part of 2 national championship teams where it's not really there wasn't much more you could have done. You win that bowl game. I think we finished ranked 6th last year in the final coach poll, and so I think the team looks back and says, boy, oof, what if we could have done this a little bit better or this a little bit better? Well, we got to be, I think it motivates you, that motivation and that excitement to get ready to be back out there on the field. So I thought that was huge for us. I don't know if the score made as much difference. The score was great. I mean, Michigan's one of the best defenses in the country, and for us to come out and play great in 2 of the 3 phases. We had 2 punts blocked. I don't think we had a great special teams day. We were solid, but not great, in the other phases. But come out offensively and defensively, play at a high level. I think it can lead to a lot of confidence going into the offseason and a hunger of, boy, we maybe didn't play our best. We weren't as good as we could be, and we finished 6th. What if we could be as good as we could be this year? What could happen? And I think that's a great motivating factor.
Well, going back for that soundbite there, Florida was coming off a 4-win season the year before, and he's still preaching to his team, hey, this 10-win season, this top 10 finish, still could have been better. You do the little things right here against Georgia. You do the little things right here against Kentucky. You do the little things right here versus Missouri, and hey, it could have been even more. It could have been fighting for a playoff spot, and it is. I do find it interesting that they're not resting on their laurels at all. It was, you turned it around, but there's still so much more.
Yeah, you can't. You really can't. And what jumped out to me in that clip, what I was thinking about was, okay, well, what were their losses again? Missouri, Georgia, Kentucky, right? He wasn't really talking about, I don't think he was talking about that Missouri game because that was horrible from the beginning and the end, and it was really hard to watch, and it was ugly. I don't think he was talking about the Kentucky game just because there was a lot of kinks that they had to work out. I know that David Reese wasn't there, and then you could try to...
Marco goes down.
Yeah, you could try to just maybe put too much stock into that, but it's real, and I think that it mattered a lot. But I also chalked that up to early in the season, and you're just not where you were. What I think that jumps out to me is that Georgia game, and I mentioned that because also during Monday, Dan Mullen made it a point to bring up that pass that Feleipe Franks threw. That was an overthrow on Van Jefferson on that, I think it was the first play, the first offensive play of the game for the Gators.
Had the flea flicker. And it was kind of reminiscent of the year before when Georgia hit a flea flicker on Mississippi State.
Exactly. and like he brought up that because he was getting questions about Feleipe Franks' arm because he's a pitcher now for the Red Sox apparently. But no, he was and that. I thought it was just interesting that he brought up that particular throw because that's what's always in my mind when I think about Feleipe Franks. And when I hear that clip just about not resting and wanting to be better, and if you're that much better or you improve upon what you weren't that great at last year, it's like, wow, what could this team accomplish? That's what they want their mindset to be. And I don't mean to pin it all on Feleipe Franks by any means, but just as that as an example, that's what comes to mind is like for Feleipe Franks, it's like that deep ball accuracy is probably the biggest thing for him right now. Yep. And you could apply that line of thinking to pretty much everybody on that team. There's always that one thing that, if they were that much better at that, where could their ceiling be? Maybe aside from Lamical Perine, who apparently does everything right these days. I think there's a guy on the team that has a question mark about a lot of about one thing on their skill set that they can improve upon. I think that's probably like one of the larger messages that he's trying to reach.
Yeah, so going to that, the bowl win, 10 win, some heightened expectations, and Feleipe Franks sits on that.
Expectations are high. 10 wins is not easy to do, I don't think, anywhere. But it's good when you do it. I mean, we had a lot of momentum built up from last season. We've worked extremely hard this off season, ready for this coming up season, and there's a lot of momentum built up. And I think we've all prepared the right way, did everything the right way this summer, and going into fall camp to prepare us for next season. So I think it's just all preparation based. I think that our team has did a great job. I think that we have a special team. Last year's team was special as well. Each team is special in their own little niche, and I think that a couple games, even last year, a couple games here and there, I don't turn the ball over so much. Versus Georgia, our season, we could be in the playoffs. You just never know. There's little things like that you just try to prepare for, because you never know when the difference-making play is going to happen in a game. Nobody knows what's going to happen when we play LSU this next year. You never know when that difference-making play is going to happen. So you just try to prepare for those things in the off season. And be ready for this upcoming season. So that's what we're doing, and I think we have a special team as well, just like last season.
We know heightened expectations for sure. Going to start the season in the top 10, probably picked second behind Georgia when we make our picks for order of finish for the SEC. Fixing the little things, kind of what Feleipe Franks is going on there. I think they're embracing the expectations, because I harp a lot on that bounce back from 2017 to 2018, and watching these kids, and the kids have fun for the first time, and it seems like forever. And now I do think with the heightened expectations, there is a lot of embrace to say, hey, let's bring it on.
When I was listening to that clip by Feleipe Franks, I thought, like, okay, there's some like cliches in there. There's a little bit of coach speak, but honestly, he sounds a lot more like a leader than he ever did last year too. If you go back, if you just like replay that real quick, you kind of hear him and you're like, okay, yeah, this guy seems to know what he's talking about here. It's pretty clear. It's pretty like lucid, like what he's saying. It's not up for debate. It's not like something that you're scratching your head like, what in the world is he talking about? It's all right there for you. And I feel like that's part of the change that has to occur with this team, is that a lot of the time last year, particularly early on, we spoke with Dan Mullen a bunch, and I spoke to coaches and players about this as well, just who are your leaders on this team? And I felt like for a lot of the season, maybe they didn't really necessarily have a whole lot of guys who they could really rely on. You had some guys who sort of set examples like a Martez Ivy, that sort of thing.
Johnson,
to some level, but like they weren't like complete leaders. Yeah. And I look at a guy like Franks as a guy who has that potential, which was why he was the quarterback in the first place. Was part of that, partially because of that reason, I would imagine. And so again, that's an example of him making some strides, because he is making sense right there, and he's saying a lot of things that need to be said if you're the QB, particularly taking some blame on yourself and saying, using yourself as an example, which he does a good job about. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. I think that they are getting that sense, and that's a product of some growing leadership, I think.
I think there's some realization here too, because, hey, look, we're going to be a top 10 team. The expectations are different, but he mentions, hey, there's going to be a close game against LSU. There's going to be close games this season, no matter how good you are, unless you're Alabama and you blow everybody out by 40 points. I mean, for as much better as Florida can be this year, there are going to be some close games. It boils down to that's how competitive the SEC is. So when they travel to Baton Rouge, and when they host, the last two times Florida's hosted Tennessee, Florida's been better, but it's been a game that's gone down to the wire with a Hail Mary and then a kind of a Greer to Callaway touchdown there to put that game away for the Gators. But I mean, there's going to be close games, and they're realizing, hey, we're going to be better, but we still, and kind of going back to what Dan Mullen said, Yeah, it was top 10 finish, but there's still so much more to do.
Yeah, and you hear it with the players is that like that's not going to be good enough this year. You know, I mean, like in a lot of pockets. I mean, I kind of expect them to finish with around 9 wins, and that wouldn't be too much of a wouldn't be an upgrade at all from last year. But that's not to say that would be an unsuccessful season though. At the same time, so you know, there's so many factors. I mean, like there's the tough schedule, there's this and there's that, but I think it does start with the people embracing the idea that it wasn't good enough last year if you're serious about being one of your top teams in the mix for the college football playoff, not just one of these teams that are in the next tier of the conversation. We're talking about teams that are going to be in the conversation. And that's what's going to separate them, because right now, you mentioned their top 10. Yeah, but the problem with that is that they're probably closer to 10 than they are to 5, right? Yep. So they want to get to the top 5, and to do that, you kind of have to have that sort of elitist mindset where, it's not good enough until it's perfected.
Well, Will, for Florida to get better, to maybe win the East, get to Atlanta and play whoever, Alabama, Auburn, A&M, or LSU in the SEC championship game, Feleipe Franks is going to have to take the next step and be a more consistent quarterback.
Hopefully, he understands his skill set better and how to utilize his skills within the offense, and he understands the offensive system as a whole better to go make plays within that system. And, and to me, in quarterback development is making the less spectacular play. A lot of times spectacular plays happen when guys don't know what they're doing. Which is kind of crazy, right? I mean, because they don't really know what they're doing, so they run around and they throw the ball 75 yards in the air and something special happens and everybody thinks that's a great play. I guess it can be good. The play might not be designed to do that. The play have been designed, boy, if you could just hang in there and be smart enough to get to your 5th progression, you check it down, we gain 8 yards, that's pretty good, because with the spectacular, I could also run around, scramble around, and get sacked for a 20-yard loss or throw an interception. And when the good play, again, would have been to get to your 5th progression in the read, check it down in the back, and get 8 yards and go play 2nd down and 2. I think that aspect of it, that's what you want to see, is him really growing and understanding the game of football and understanding it within what we want him to do within the offense.
We talk about consistency and improvement for Feleipe Franks. Well, you brought it up. He's definitely got to get better tossing the ball down the field a little bit more with the deep passes, and overthrew so many wide open guys last year. And we saw it going back to last year. It was when it was brought up so much today, and we'll get into it too with the late season 4-game stretch where he kind of turned it around. But that 4-game stretch was all good, all well and good. But we know that it's that 4-game stretch, and we're going to have to see that for 12 games coming up this year.
Yeah, and it was also, like, I know Dan Mullen talked about Michigan having a great defense. A lot of those guys didn't play. Yeah. And you saw it on the field. Those guys were pretty checked out, too, not for nothing. Plus, you also played Florida State, which was the epitome of being checked out last year. So there was that. Who else was in that mix? South Carolina, which did not have a very good defense either.
And we're missing a ton of players as well.
And that 4th game was Idaho, right? So, yeah, I'm not trying to take a whole lot away from Feleipe Franks, because it was night and day difference. Yeah. If you watch his film and you're saying to yourself, "Who is this guy?"
It means, at least there was improvement.
Yeah, definitely. You cannot take that away from me. That's undeniable. But I'm just saying, let's not get carried away with how good he's become, because to me he still has to prove it. I mean, he still has to prove it against Miami in week 0. But to speak to a couple of Dan Mullen's points there in that last clip, you look at Feleipe Franks, he's just so much more comfortable. And I think that's where it starts, where, like you mentioned, David, the idea of maybe Florida fans don't want him to be shushing people and that's this or that. But, hey, if I'm a Florida fan, I'm actually okay with it, just because, hey, give me something.
Absolutely.
Give me some emotion here. Show me that you care. Show me that you're invested here. And show me that you care about yourself, but you don't care about what anybody else thinks anymore, because that's what people are tired about.
And I like that. And I said it multiple times at Radio Row today. Is he took the persona of Dan Mullen and not the persona of Jim McElwain.
That's a great point.
It finally took some time, but McElwain had that "woe is me" attitude, us against the world, and Mullen was like, don't listen to what the media says, but hey, embrace this fan base, let the crowd get behind you. And the sure thing, maybe it should have happened. Maybe it should have happened. But I don't think you can argue with the result.
No, you can't. You can't argue with how different he has looked. I'm not talking about statistics or anything like that. I'm just talking about watch the guy play, and he is so sure of himself. And that's something that Dan Mullen was talking about in that last clip of making those type of plays where you're not really scrambling around trying to make things happen on your own. You know exactly what's possible here. And yeah, maybe you do have to improvise a little bit. You watch and you see a lane open up, you take it, whatever. But it starts with being confident and going through those reads first, knowing what it's possible to have before you just shut it down and start freelancing, which was a little bit of what he did against Kentucky. If you look back and watch a couple of the first plays in that offense, and it just didn't really work because there was really no flow to it. It looked as if it was just not something he was comfortable doing quite yet, with making those adjustments and reads, prior to the snap and right afterward.
All right, then to extend that thought, it was asked of Feleipe Franks, what does Dan Mullen mean to him?
I think that I always love when I get that question. I love talking about Coach Mullen because he hasn't just helped me, him and Coach Johnson. They haven't just helped me become a better quarterback in general. They've helped me do that, but they've helped me more, become a better man also. And I always love to just let people know that as well, that he's a great person outside of football as well. He's helped me become a better man, person off the field, and in the locker room. But at quarterback position, one of the best that I've been around. If not the best that I've been around. Coach Mullen does a great job of just being hands-on. When he first came in, we had a offense, that's not easy to learn. It's one of those kind of offenses, it takes 2 years to really learn it. But, we needed to learn it right away within that year. So he's kind of the guy that's always, he's in the meeting rooms with the quarterbacks. You need to do this, you need to do this. Hands-on kind of guy, and I really love that. It's kind of how I learn. And he's did a great job with me personally, just helping me grow in that way.
I love Feleipe Franks' first thought there was to go off the field. It had nothing to do with on the field. It was what Dan Mullen has done to him as Feleipe Franks, the person, the student athlete, more so than the football player.
Yeah, that was really interesting, right? I didn't quite expect that, but yeah, it's a great point because a lot of people don't know that too, that Dan Mullen has such a vested interest in all of his players, but a lot of times it's the quarterback because he expects so much out of that position, and he understands that a lot of it extends to off the field. You're the guy that people look to, whether you're a vocal guy or not, you're setting the example. And so you're the guy that everybody looks to. Yeah, and you have to, and Dan Mullen always says, there's a reason why people care about the quarterback position at Florida. It's because of the precedent that's been set, and the standards are so high. And so, yeah, you have to sort of construct and help develop somebody who's going to come close to reaching those standards, if not surpass them.
And then the part that I liked, and I didn't really get a chance to ask this today but Frank said, an offensive system that's going to take 2 years or whatever. So I do wonder how much of the offense was open to Feleipe Franks last year. Did it get to the point in those last 4 games when he started using his legs that they trusted him to more design runs? And we know that helps bring linebackers up and make secondary second guess with what they're seeing, and it leaves receivers open. And but was that some of the same plays they were running earlier in the year, and it just finally clicked for Feleipe Franks? Or and the transition from year 1 to year 2, are we going to see stuff that we hadn't seen? And I'll play a bite from Lamical Perine coming up soon, but you had an implementation of a tunnel screen to Lamical Perine where we had no idea that was in the playbook. We had no idea Lamical Perine could catch a pass like that, basically as a wide receiver there. So I do wonder now, we talk about taking that next step, is it possibly just because it's year 2 and Feleipe Franks knows and has the availability of more of the offense?
Yeah, definitely. It's like one of those deals where you don't know what you don't know. Like for you and I to be talking about it, we don't know.
We don't.
We don't. But I do know that there were a lot more design runs in the second half of the season, particularly those last 4 games. And that leads to the idea that there are a lot of things that Feleipe Franks is grasping and doing well that Dan Mullen wants to continue to sort of showcase. That's really what the offense is about. Is it can work for any QB because the staff is going to allow the quarterback to play to his strengths and sort of minimize those weaknesses. And so for Feleipe Franks, a lot of it's on the ground right now. A lot of it's in the short passing game. And we don't know, I mean, yeah, Perine was a big part of that. Who else can be? That maybe wasn't or was perhaps underutilized. A guy like Lucas Krull comes to mind. Like, what can you do with him this year? Or Kyle Pitts, that we didn't really see a whole lot with. We saw some with Lucas Krull, but definitely not on a consistent basis. Yeah. And it was in flashes and just here and there. I want to see what happens when it's Krull, Pitts, Toney, Grimes, Jefferson, and somebody like Hammond on the field all together. That's fascinating to see, because I think that would speak to the idea of what could happen with this group.
Absolutely, and here we go. It's kind of wrapping up here, and some more thoughts on that late season stretch.
Back to the South Carolina game, did you ever notice a dip in Felipe's confidence level coming off a couple of losses? And if so, how was he able to flip that so quickly, lead that comeback, and then basically roll through the rest of the year at a pretty high level?
Well, I think one of the ones, with him was learning how to block out all the outside noise and not worried about what's not important. I sound like an arrogant or demeaning statement to people, but, if whoever was tweeting at you on Twitter was a more qualified quarterback coach than me or Brian Johnson, they would be our quarterback coach. So I don't know why their opinion would even matter. And so I think once you're able to kind of block out the outside noise and just really start focusing on what's important, look at your skill set, look at what you're able to do, and go do those things at a high level, you're going to be successful. And I think one of the things he was able to do was start to block those things out and realize that we had confidence in him and that he's pretty good. He's okay. And to worry about doing things well. And when he started to do that, he really took off and I think finished the season really strong and had a great spring as well.
Was there ever a moment last year where you did see a dip in confidence? I'm thinking of the South Carolina game, coming off Georgia and Missouri and being down there, where you ever thought, I don't know if this is going to quite work out, but then you flipped it quickly, won that game, and obviously rolled through the rest of the year. But was there ever a moment where it started to teeter a little bit with those two losses and then being down against South Carolina?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think about where you said, what'd you say? I don't think this is going to work out. Or no, there's never been that kind of point. I'm the type of person, when something doesn't go my way, I've always been taught you keep on working. You don't just give up and turn your back. But, no, I've never did that. I've never just been like, this isn't going to work out. I work harder and more diligently, not just me, but with my teammates, and that just helps me. I've been saying it all day, but, I've always been the type of person that works super hard, but been wanting that production to meet my work ethic, and so that's kind of just what I've been waiting on, and that's what happened. So,
while the head coach and quarterback are going to get most, if not all, the headlines at SEC Media Days, Florida did also bring running back Lamical Perine and defensive end Jabari Zuniga. Perine looks to be part of, at least behind Franks, the focal point of the offense of him coming back. Tested NFL waters a little bit, but decided to come back for his senior season. And Jabari Zuniga will be looked at as probably the main pass rusher with Jahari Rogers going. And let's hear from those two guys. Lamical, split carries with Scarlett a good bit last year. Are you looking forward to be maybe more of the workhorse, or still kind of splitting carries along the way?
Like, whatever my teammates need me to do and whatever my coaches need me to do to win games, I do it. That's how I feel, honestly. I'm not a selfish person. I'm not going to say I'm going to get all the workload because, it's a lot of other running backs out there who want their opportunity just like I do, so I'm just going to take advantage of every opportunity that I have.
Let's go back to the Peach Bowl. Tunnel screen, play kind of came along. And was that something that had been kind of saved for that game or worked on in bowl prep?
Coach Mullen has he got a lot of tricks in the bag, so he throw them out every once in a while, so he can surprise a lot of people every once in a while.
Was that something you were comfortable with doing? You look natural doing this. Was that just?
He just knew. He trusted my ability to be able to catch the ball, man, and I think I'm on that, and I'm just gonna keep trying to keep getting better.
Were y'all working on that play throughout the season, or did it come through bowl prep?
It just came through bowl prep, really.
Mostly with Jordan Scarlett last year, pretty even stats. Will he be more of a bell cow this year, or do you see the top two backs splitting carries like that?
Well, I love to be able to rotate guys through because I think for a couple of reasons. One, health being a huge part of it. Keeps guys healthy and fresher throughout the course of the season. Continues to allow young guys to grow and develop. as you're ready. And it builds the team part of it all. You look at last year, you had Jordan Scarlett and Perine, and after Malik Davis got hurt early in the season, when Damian Pierce came in, but all those guys, I mean, what they were worried about was how hard they went and how hard they could go on every single play, and they didn't worry about, am I getting enough carries, too many carries, any of this. Just when I'm in the game, go work to be my best, and that really shows unselfishness as players. It really shows maturity as players, and understand it. And then I think once they go through it, I think it really gives them an understanding to say, hey, this is beneficial for me to do it this way. So I think that's a help, but, we're not going to be afraid to get them the ball. I know that much.
Will, I think I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of forecasting, and I'll jump in too. I actually think he'll be a bell cow. I don't see him and Jordan Scarlett almost had the same stats last year. And I know Mullen's history shows that he likes to disperse equally carries here, but I think the type of weapon Lamical Perine is, I'm going to call him a bell cow, and I do think he probably by far and away gets the most carries of the running back this year.
So, what percentage would you put it off of? If it's not 50-50, what do you say, Perine
I could say
percentage versus everybody else?
Yeah, him probably 60-65, but then Davis and Pierce actually splitting. Those two guys.
That's what I was going to say.
Those two guys being kind of close.
We're on the same page then.
Perine's going to get the bulk, and then you split behind that. So
I agree with that.
Next year, you'll get to see more of Davis and Pierce, but Lamical Perine, he came back to be, I think, the bell cow and kind of enjoy it. And I'm not saying that's the only reason he came back, or Mullen promised him, 30, 40 carries a game.
Right.
But with what he showed in the Peach Bowl as a receiver and a long run against Michigan and Florida State, I think he has the chance to be one of the SEC's better backs and be a bell cow for Florida.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think what you kind of have to consider a lot of times is that they went up tempo a lot in those big time drives, like the one against LSU that I'm thinking of, the big one against South Carolina, where a lot of times they were swapping them in and out, and they kept them fresh. So if you're gonna do that, I'm totally down with that. So it kind of depends on what you're doing in game, and so there's maybe a way or a path where it's maybe a little bit less than we think for Perine, just because there are certain situations like that where you just want to get him off the field to keep him fresh, for that he could explode for that next run, and you have the quality of depth to do that. But as far as I don't see it just, and it's interesting because I asked Lamical this today. I was like, man, do you think the coaching staff knew what they had in you, those first handful of games, because it wasn't until that Vanderbilt game where you really broke out, and he's like, nah, they knew what they had in me, and I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of guessed that
Jordan Scarlett's a senior,
But it kind of looked that way, where it's I was like, man, do they really know how capable this guy is? Because he can do a little bit of everything and do it well. Yeah. So he's going to be on the field a bunch. I think that's probably the easiest way to put it. And he's going to be on the field more than any other running back. That goes without saying. And there's no denying it. It's just a matter of how much of an improvement he can make in those yards per carry. Yeah. What's he going to be able to give you if you do give him those extra carries? What does that equate to? Right. How many more yards? And how much more of a factor can he be in the passing game? Like you mentioned earlier, I think he could be a much bigger factor because he has great hands. I just like him in the passing game. If you remember some of those passes to Scarlett, man, he just went right off his body. I mean, there was no shot at him catching some of those, even though it was right to him. And I like Jordan Scarlett, but man, he couldn't catch sometimes. He had trouble with that. And Lamical is just so much more, you know what you're getting in that department. You could pencil him in for a couple of catches. But I think it should be more than that. I think he can get 4 or 5.
Yeah, I pegged him as, going into last season, one of the most underrated players on the roster, and it kind of hit on that. But my knock on him was, where are the big runs? And as the season went on, against Florida State, first touchdown in the game, big run, had another one in Michigan. So we saw it and got teased late last season. Hopefully it carries on to 2019. Let's hear from Jabari Zuniga before we wrap up this episode. Jabari, Sports Illustrated named you 38th best player in college football. How's that make you feel, man?
I guess it made me feel good. Now I just got to go out there and show them why I'm worthy of that, of that spot.
Jacob Polite, how was it, having a player like him to play with, and how much did it help you?
It was, well, first of all, Jahari Polite is a very special talent, and just knowing that I had somebody next to me of that capability, it really gave me the confidence to go out and do whatever I can, because I knew that if I didn't get him, then Jahari was going to get him, so.
Schematically, how did that help you, though? I mean, you've got one guy the offensive line or quarterback's keying in on. Did you feel like it helped your production as well?
I do, yeah, because a lot of times, Jahari would take up, the running back would chip him or the tight end would chip him. So, that would leave. It wouldn't only help me out, but it'll help, Schuler out or Kyrie or TJ, whoever was in the game.
You've seen through spring practice, Grenard comes in. You kind of see that same capability with him?
Yeah, Grenard. John is definitely, a great talent. Coming in, I wasn't really shocked because his last year at Louisville, he had like 17 TFLs, so I wasn't shocked. I knew he was a player, but he definitely showed me some stuff. That's a hell of a player as well.
Coach David Turner coming in and seems to be relatable to you guys. What's the biggest change from past staff? I mean, you've had a lot of defensive line coaches since you've been at Florida. What's Turner bring to the table that's a little bit different?
Coach Turner's an old school, hard-nosed coach. He's one of those coaches that believes if you get what you get in, or you get what you put in. You know what I'm saying? So he's one of those guys that he'll work your tail off, but at the end of the day, you understand because you get what you put in, basically.
Well, I think for Zuniga, a lot of it came with experience last year, and he was his third year. And the third year, you expect progression from a certain player, and especially like him. But I asked him, of course, about Jahari Polite, and that was a little bit of a surprise what he was able to bring to the table last year. And I think there were opposing offenses that really had to game plan for somebody like Jahari Polite, and I think it was a player like Jabari Zuniga who was able to take advantage.
Yeah, the thing is, you're right with that. I just want to say quickly with Jabari Zuniga, he's a guy who's so understated a little bit, right? Yeah. Like he's really he's good to talk to. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that, but he's a little bit understated and a little bit reserved. And I just wish he played with a little bit more of a mean streak because, like you mentioned at the beginning of that chat with him, he was on our freaks list. The guy has the body for it. He has the skill level. Now he could clean some things up and he could have finished with some more sacks, but if he played with just a little bit more of a mean streak of an Adam Schuler, how crazy would a season with Jabari Zuniga have? Yeah. If he played that style where it was that relentless give that Jahari Polite showed on certain plays.
I mean, and I know Florida lost, but the goal line stand versus Georgia, Zuniga was almost in every play. On that. Yeah, you're right.
I just want to see it consistently though. I want to see that consistent mean streak in him because if he does that, then he's going to get those sacks because Todd Grantham told me months ago, the guy could have had 10 sacks easy. He missed them. You watch the games. Go back and watch it. I did. Yeah, he was missing guys. He was 1 centimeter away, 1 inch away. Just missed him. Missed him with his arm, whatever the case happened. So he's going to get those sacks anyway. He's going to be in better position to. Todd Grantham's going to make that a priority this year because of how talented the guy is. But, man, I just think that he has so much upside that when I hear him speak, I'm kind of thinking to myself, just play a little bit meaner. Play a little bit meaner and just give. It's just that's coming from me, who's very analytically based. To kind of say that, and it's hard for me to kind of accept that came out of my mouth. But I truly believe that there's something to that, though. That maybe it's just in his personality that he has to sort of get over, or just kind of get to that next level. But I'm eager to see it because he has the experience, he has the body, he has the talent. He just has to put it together for a bigger season.
All right, that'll do it for our SEC Media Day coverage here from Hoover, Alabama. Will, man, can't thank you enough. Nice to get to hang out with you for a couple of days and talk some Gators football. With you guys, I'm sure plenty of SEC Media Day coverage coming up on The Athletic.
Yeah, definitely, man. It was great chatting with you. This week, kind of doing a cool story on Feleipe Franks. He mentioned just the idea of wanting to be more of the face of Florida, or just kind of accepting what that impact is. And he talked about this kid that he met at Walmart. Turns out that the kid biggest wish was to meet Feleipe Franks. Kid had 3 open heart surgeries, and by happenstance, they actually met at Walmart. It's a pretty remarkable story, so I would appreciate if people check that out, in addition to the story about attrition and, like, the scholarship numbers and all that type of stuff. But yeah, that's a cool story on Feleipe Franks, because it just shows you a different sort of side to him that I think a lot of people don't know about.
All right, Will Sammon from The Athletic. Go check it out there. Download the app. Go to theathletic.com as well. So there we go. And go check out Will's good work. And the last little bit we'll hear from the players are Lamical Perine and Feleipe Franks. And kind of speaking on how Kadarius Toney earned that number 1 jersey from Dan Mullen. Of course, the number 1 jersey, popular with the players. And Toney gets it. What did you see from him? Was it is he becoming more of a complete receiver, kind of just pure playmaker? I know Mullen said you got to be a baller. Is that pretty much what it is for Toney?
I feel like he's a baller, honestly, man. I'm gonna support him all the time, because where he from. He from the same hometown I'm from, Mobile, Alabama. So I feel like he's one of the best athletes that probably came through Florida in the last 10 years, honestly. He can do anything you want: cutback, elusive, return. He can do whatever you want, man. That's just what he is. And I feel like to wear number 1, you got to be a special player. And both him and C.J. Henderson are both special.
Was that something you ever thought about, maybe trying to get in for the number 1, or keep your jersey?
I feel like it comes with some big shoes to fill. So it's not the fact that I feel like I can't fill those shoes. It's just I'm good on. I'd rather not. I just rather be number 2.
The number 1 jersey, of course, is coveted at Florida. Kadarius Toney just got a guy you'll be throwing the ball to a lot. What did you see from Toney so he could earn that number 1?
Yeah, Toney's. You guys see it every Saturday. He's just one of those kind of different breeds. He's an awesome football player. Guys can just always make something happen with the ball. Be on one side of the field, make something happen on the other side of the field, and then next thing I know, I end up blocking. So it's one of those guys that you just love to out throw him the ball and just sit back and just watch him go. But really good player. He's earned everything that he's gotten. Humble guy. Walks around the locker room, confident but humble all the time. Great guy to be around. Somebody that people love to be around. So he's just an awesome guy, but a really good football player as well.
All right, before we go, a little bit of recruiting news, some breaking news while we're here at Hoover, and the Gators get their latest commitment in cornerback Jahari Rogers. With the losses of Chris Steele and Edwards recently, you really needed to hit with a big-time cornerback, and the Gators did here with Rogers being a 4-star, 93.7 rating on 24/7 Sports Composite. He's the 154th ranked player in the country, 10th ranked quarterback in the country. The 6-foot, 170-pound cornerback from Arlington, Texas, joins fellow Texan 4-star Avery Helm and 3-star from Lakeland, Finley Graham as the cornerbacks for this 2020 class that the Gators are working on right now. You don't have a lot of cornerback film on Rogers. He's a run-heavy quarterback in high school. A great athlete. 24/7 Sports says enough height and adequate frame that likely plays cornerback, but has some safety projectability as well. Shows above average speed in the combine settings and good change of direction as well, when one of the nation's better short shuttle times. In man coverage, he has reactive quickness and athleticism to be really good. Predictability can get lost in zone coverage and camp settings due to limited experience on defense. And he's going to be a project. Not a lot of experience playing cornerback, so kind of surprising that you see him being a 4-star and the 154th ranked player in the country without the experience of playing cornerback. A lot of this is going on camp settings and whatnot. So we'll see. He is going to be a project. He'll have to come in here and develop. And part of the reason he chose Florida, he's going to get developed by the best. Torian Gray was a big factor here in bringing in Rogers, and to pair him with Avery Helm. It's kind of weird. Florida's going out to Texas to get 2 cornerbacks here when the state of Florida is kind of known for that position, especially for University of Florida guys there. But you go get them where you can, and Florida picks up one good one here, as I mentioned, a 4-star, 154th ranked player in the country, and the 10th ranked cornerback in the country is Jahari Rogers. So that'll do it for this episode. Well, never mind. Hold on. With Rogers' commitment The Gators now rank 8th in the 24/7 Sports Composite ranking and the 4th ranked team in the SEC there, with an average class rating of 89.9 there, so almost a 90 rating for the 2020 class right now on the 24/7 Sports Composite. And that'll do it for this episode of Gators Breakdown from Hoover, Alabama at SEC Media Days 2019. Fun time, tired time, a lot of work here, but it wouldn't have it any other way. A lot of fun. Glad we could bring and talk, bring on Will Sammon to talk with him and get thoughts from Dan Mullen and the players here. It was a fun day had by all, and I think you could tell the players were having a little bit of fun with it as well. So stay tuned. We'll keep talking Gators this week and all the other SEC schools there at SEC Media Days. I'm sure check us out on Twitter at Gators Breakdown. Check me out on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. I'm sure I'll release sometime this week the way I'll vote for the predicted order of finish for the SEC and the like. That's always a fun time, and you'll probably see it Alabama in the West and Georgia in the East there. But we'll see how it all shakes out, and we'll kind of discuss that on next week's episode of Gators Breakdown, where Florida's pegged in the SEC here, and what players are put on the All SEC list. So that'll do it for this episode of Gators Breakdown. I'm David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.